There's something surprising hidden in Genesis chapter 5, or at least I was surprised when I first saw it. It's buried in the genealogy of Seth, and it's one of those parts of the Bible that many people skip over because it's a little bit tedious. But when I really thought about it, I realized that this one verse is so powerful that it shapes the spirituality of the entire Bible, all the way from Noah to Jesus of Nazareth. Let me read it to you. This is Genesis chapter 5, verse 24, and I'll give you the full context later. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's it. No further details, no other explanations. So most people just glance right over it, but I couldn't because I'm carving the Bible word for word into granite. And that forces me to go slowly, to consider every word, to think about what it is that I'm engraving into stone. And this one verse, it's revolutionary because it is completely countercultural to how the ancient world understood divine favor and the afterlife. It goes against what people in the ancient Near East believed about who gets taken into heaven and why. But today, this idea is so fundamental to the Bible that we barely notice it. So in this video, I'm going to unpack this mystery, and I'm going to show you why Genesis chapter 5, verse 24 is so influential in shaping biblical spirituality. My name is Francisco, and if you're new here, welcome to Carving the Bible. I'll start by reading Genesis chapter 5, verse 21 to chapter 6, verse 3. These are the verses that I'm carving in this video. So just sit back and listen, and even if some of these verses don't seem particularly relevant, I promise you they are. And Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he had begotten Methuselah 300 years and begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And Methuselah lived 187 years and begot Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he had begotten Lamech 782 years and begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son. And he called his name Noah, saying, This one shall comfort us concerning our work and concerning the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. And Lamech lived after he had begotten Noah 595 years and begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass when mankind began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took themselves wives of all that they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always plead with man, for he indeed is flesh, but his days shall be 120 years. So, as you listen to those verses, one name stands out, and that is the name of Enoch. Why? Because every other person follows this pattern. He lived a certain number of years, he had sons and daughters, and then he died. But not Enoch. This is what it says about Enoch. And he was not, for God took him. God directly intervenes, removing Enoch from the natural order. Later Jewish and Christian interpretations take this to mean that Enoch was taken directly into God's presence. Now, at the time that Genesis was written, likely during the Babylonian exile around the 6th century BCE, the Israelites did not believe in heaven and hell. Instead, like their Mesopotamian neighbors, they believed that after death, everyone went into this shadowy underworld where they existed as weak spirits with no real awareness. But Enoch avoided this fate, and this is where it gets really interesting. Now, Enoch is not the first person in these ancient stories to avoid death and ascend to the divine realm. In Mesopotamian and Near Eastern traditions, others were said to join the gods instead of dying. Etana, the legendary king of Kish, ascended to heaven on the back of an eagle. Utnapishtim and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, was a Mesopotamian flood survivor, and he was granted immortality. The pharaohs were believed to rise to the stars, joining a divine council. Heracles was made a god on Mount Olympus after completing his labors. Now, what do all of those have in common? They were kings, they were warriors, they were heroes. They were people who had power, who had status, who had great accomplishments. But Enoch is radically different. He was not a king. He was not a warrior. He did not have any great accomplishments or feats. What did he do? He walked with God. That's it. That was enough for God to take him. In the ancient Near East, this idea was mind-blowing. The idea was that divine ascension was for the mighty, for rulers, for the elites. But the Bible flips this upside down. It's not about power. It's not about status. Instead, it's about walking with God. This idea changed everything and helped to shape Western spirituality for thousands of years. It's one of the reasons that the Bible has had such a massive impact on world history. It's also important to note how the Babylonian exile might have shaped the story of Enoch. This was a time when the Israelites were captives in Babylon and mostly powerless. So for them, having kings and heroes taken to the divine realm did not help. It made much more sense to focus on what they could do. That is, walk with God. That is what they could hold on to, as they no longer even had a king. I believe that the spiritual insight of this verse was gained as captives, not as rulers, and that made all the difference. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. It would really help the channel. To find out more about why I'm carving the Bible into granite, check the description below. But this brings us to the spiritual secret of Genesis chapter 5, verse 24. What did walking with God mean at that time? At the time that Enoch was supposed to have lived, there was no Torah, there were no commandments, there was no temple, there were no ritual sacrifices. So walking with God is not about following religious rules or laws. Instead, walking with God seems to be more about a moral and spiritual attitude, living a life in alignment with the divine will, choosing righteousness even without written laws, and prioritizing that pursuit over status, wealth, and power. Genesis 5:24 doesn't mention sacrifices, rituals, or religious duties, only that Enoch walked with God. This means that a genuine spiritual life was about intimacy with the sacred, not just about religious observance. The impact of this verse was so profound that later traditions expanded on it. The book of Enoch, 1st Enoch, explores his divine journey. Jewish apocalypticism links him to the concept of the Son of Man, and Christianity later on builds on the idea of ascension to God's presence. All the way from Noah to Jesus of Nazareth, this verse planted a seed that shaped biblical spirituality. Enoch's story is a monotheistic reinterpretation of older traditions where divine favor is based on righteousness, not on power. Instead of a king, a warrior, or a hero, a righteous person is granted a place in God's presence. And that's the spiritual secret of Genesis chapter 5, verse 24. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. It would help this channel a lot.